Hello, today I want to address something that's been coming up in my conversations with people about personal growth, and that is this concept of feeling versus dwelling, or sometimes it comes up as, is it possible to feel too much of my emotions or spend too much time in a feeling opened up, vulnerable kind of state? The first part of my answer to this question is to differentiate a good, positive, healthy kind of feeling from a negative, downward spiraling kind of feeling that I'm going to refer to as dwelling, as in dwelling on something. And I think this is a really important topic to address because I've been a proponent of the feeling practice. The feeling practice is one of the 4 tools in Idoga, and I've been a really strong advocate of this idea of feeling your feelings and not repressing them. So to address the limitations of that or the possible shadow sides of feeling, I think is really important. So as I see it, dwelling is this infinite loop that you can get into where you are feeling your feelings, you're not repressing them, but you're also sort of creating negative emotions at the same time that you're feeling them. And your openness to them is in some way maybe even a participant in this sort of infinite creation of a negative emotion. And so you end up stuck there, you don't really get out of it, and you don't really make the kind of progress that we would expect from somebody using the feeling tool in a really good, healthy way. So how can we make sure that we're using feeling in a really positive, growthful way and not falling into the trap of dwelling? So first of all, I would say make sure that you incorporate a really strong element of relaxation into your feeling. If you are tensing yourself up into a kind of frenzy, that can be generating more negative emotion and keeping you stuck in an infinite loop of dwelling. By relaxing, you can let go of unhelpful intentions, and then you will stop doing some of the unhelpful, perhaps subconscious things that your mind and psyche are doing to produce those negative emotions. So relaxation is tip number 1 for healthy feeling and preventing unhealthy dwelling. Tip number 2, which is related, is to not participate in the stories surrounding your negative emotion, but to simply listen to them instead. So oftentimes what happens in dwelling is you hear certain thoughts or you start to develop a story about a situation, and then you actively participate in that story. You're thinking about it more, and you're putting energy into that story, investigating it, and continuing to do a lot of thinking. So in a healthy form of feeling, we really aren't investing any energy into mental activity. It's all about an emotional level of feeling, an embodied level of feeling, like actual physical feelings in your body. And it's okay to witness and observe thoughts happening and floating by and coming up and going away. That's all sort of part of the feeling or observational practice, but we don't actually want to participate in those feelings because that participation, again, can be part of what's generating the negative emotion and misleading our entire state of being. So tip number 3 is to not believe in the stories that you're telling yourself. So not only do you not participate in any sort of mental stories that are happening, but you also withhold your belief that those stories are true. Now, the idea here is that after you've done your emotional processing, you can create a space for really deciding what you believe is true and perhaps making decisions or setting intentions. That's all good stuff to do towards the end of the emotional processing or after the emotional processing is completed. During the emotional processing, we just want to have a space to feel what's there and observe what's there and be able to take those things in without necessarily taking them seriously. And sometimes our insistence on taking things seriously prevents us from actually seeing what's there or feeling what's there in our psyche. So we want to just sort of withhold our belief that what's happening is truly reflective of reality. Instead, we're just going to sort of watch those thoughts and emotions that are happening almost as if they're another separate character within us that could be right or wrong, in touch with reality or not. And that kind of distance, again, is going to help you to not continuously be creating more of the emotion that you are focusing on as you open yourself up to feeling. Okay, tip number 4, and my final tip, is to eventually move on to other kinds of practices after you spend some time doing feeling. I do believe that feeling is a really essential and important tool. That being said, you can sometimes come to the end of a process with your feeling practice and still not really feel that great. You could still have a lot of negative emotions swirling around, and at the end of the feeling practice, you may be really in touch with those emotions, but they may not really be fully resolved. And you may need other tools and practices to really fully heal the emotions that you're feeling, or to really fully get to the next stage that you want to get to. So there are, of course, tons and tons of self-growth tools out there. I mean, just to name some of the ones I focus on in the Adoga framework, after you sort of feel complete with feeling, we can move on to observing, which is sort of feeling with more of a sense of distance. And we can also move on to imaginative exercises and intention setting exercises. As well as relaxation. So those are all different possibilities, and I talk about those in more detail in other videos. But I would say that if you've been doing feeling for a while and you're still feeling a lot of difficult emotions, it may be time to just try a different practice. So those are my tips for using the feeling practice in a healthy way while also avoiding this trap of dwelling. I want to speak to a final point on this topic, and this is slightly more advanced. It is possible to intentionally stimulate a negative emotion for the purposes of working through it. So, for example, if there's an issue that you know bothers you, but you're not really in touch with it in a certain meditation or at a certain time when you want to do personal growth work, then you can use certain imaginations to work with that theme or topic. For example, if you have a strong phobia around hippopotamuses, but it's not really up for you in a certain moment where you're doing personal growth work, you can use imaginations of hippopotamuses to then bring up feelings, which you then use tools like relaxation, feeling, and observation to process. So this is almost like if you were using dwelling in a conscious and growthful way. And this, I think, can be pretty valuable if you know what you're doing and if you are ready for that kind of work. But even in this stimulation style personal growth work, we still want to avoid the infinite loop of dwelling. You may use some stimulating imaginations to bring feelings up, but you still want to eventually get to a point where those feelings get processed, quiet down, and you move forward. You don't spiral into a continuous loop of building that emotion up as you feel it, which is the unhealthy kind of dwelling that we've been addressing. All right, that's all for now, friends, and I'll see you next time on Depth and Conversation.